your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. Thanks so much for joining us for a look at what made headlines this past week. Well, Canada Post now has the ability to store and transport restricted firearms. The change comes as the federal government introduces new regulations that bring the retail gun buyback program one step closer to beginning. First, the government will buy restricted firearms from retail stores and have them destroyed before a buyback for people who own restricted weapons begins next year. An October 16th order in council now allows for restricted assault-style firearms to be removed from safes, transported, and ultimately destroyed. Justin Trudeau says he will remain Prime Minister despite a caucus revolt. His comments come after a group of 24 Liberal MPs asked Trudeau to step down in a letter presented to him on Wednesday. It asked for him to let the caucus know by October 28th what his decision would be. Trudeau says he has no intention of stepping down as Liberal Party leader by Monday.
We're going to continue to have great conversations about what is the best way to take on Pierre Poilievre in the next election, but that'll happen with me as leader going into the next election.
Earlier in the week, during question period, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre discussed how so many Liberal MPs want to see Justin Trudeau resign as Prime Minister. Poilievre says many of those MPs are frustrated they cannot even talk about issues that are negatively affecting their constituents, including the federal carbon tax.
We now learn there are about 40 Liberal MPs that believe that this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost, crime, and corruption. But there's this strange rule in the Liberal caucus that you need to have permission from the Prime Minister to speak at the microphone. So a Liberal MP wanted to get up and say quadrupling the carbon tax is a bad idea, or doubling housing costs is making people homeless. They can't do it. Will the Prime Minister lift the gag so his Liberal MPs can say to his face that he's not worth the crime, the cost, and the corruption?
We see at which point the Conservative leader is simply focused on playing politics and gaining power. That's why he wants to talk about things that are not having to do with delivering for Canadians. He doesn't want to talk about the fact that close to 1 million Canadians will be receiving dental care because of our Canadian dental program that he says doesn't even exist and that he's voted against every step of the way.
Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilley says even though there's some unrest within the Liberal Party, it wouldn't be enough to have Trudeau replaced as leader.
These guys have not been well organized in doing this. Unlike Paul Martin and Jean Chrétien, Martin's people actually went before the cameras. They went to people like you and I and said, hey, I think this guy has to go. This is my face. This is my name. Here's why he has to go. They're not doing that. It's all very quiet behind the scenes. It's actually why you've got someone like me, who's a pretty staunch critic of the Prime Minister, coming out and defending him in a way and saying these guys have to put up or shut up.
In other news, the Bank of Canada slashed its key policy rate by 50 base points to 3.75% on Wednesday. The bank's governor, Tiff Macklem, says they lowered the interest rate because inflation is around the 2% target, which is their sweet spot.
In the past few months, inflation has come down significantly from 2.7% in June to 1.6% in September. Recent indicators suggest it'll be around 2% in October. Price pressures are no longer broad-based, and both our measures of core inflation are now below 2.5%. Our surveys also find that businesses and consumer expectations of inflation have shifted down and are nearing normal.
Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Thomas is demanding that the CBC's CEO refund taxpayers. Thomas says Catherine Tate admitted she charged taxpayers $6,000, including a $1,000 a night luxury hotel while attending the Paris Olympics. She says she was there for personal and not work-related reasons. Tate is scheduled to testify at a Commons committee about the $18.4 million in bonuses CBC executives received, even though hundreds of CBC staff lost their jobs.
Now, we know that Miss Tate herself received a $60,000 bonus this last summer. $60,000, that's more than the average salary of a Canadian in this country. So for Miss Tate to determine that she's going to slash 600 jobs while still being okay with giving, potentially millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars in bonuses is absolute ludicrous.
Thomas says since Tate took over as CEO in 2018, viewership of CBC has dropped by half and has been consistently declining in numbers. The Alberta government announced it will be providing $112 million for 250 interim housing units for the residents of Jasper. A wildfire back in July wiped out about a third of the town, including 800 housing units and many hotels.
These are not temporary structures or camps. These will be permanent homes that will be fully serviced and will provide a safe place to call home for displaced Jasperites. Servicing work has already started on these sites to prepare them for homes to be installed. And based on site servicing timelines and available inventory of modular homes in Alberta, we expect that these homes will be available as early as January 2025. Modular homes will be constructed off-site in a controlled environment to allow for all-season construction and accelerated construction schedules.
On another note, both the province and Ottawa announced last week that they were putting a combined $5.5 million towards attracting tourists to the Rocky Mountain resort town. Well, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith visited Lethbridge to campaign for the UCP's nominee for Lethbridge West, John Middleton Hope. The two of them, alongside Affordability and Utilities Minister Nathan Neudorf, began door-knocking in our city on Monday to drum up support for Middleton Hope ahead of the soon-to-be-called by-election. Premier Smith says she's waiting on Naheed Nenshi to run for a seat for himself before calling multiple by-elections.
I had thought that by now, he's been elected since June. I kind of thought one of his caucus members would step down for him. And in the interest of taxpayers, it would be nice to have both of those by-elections at the same time. And so he has a few more weeks to see if one of his candidates, one of his MLAs will step up and make way for him so that he can be in the legislature. And if that doesn't happen, then we'll call the by-election. It's a lot easier to have two by-elections at once rather than do this one and then in a couple of months do another one. And so if he wants to get into the legislature, now's the time to do it. He's got 14 MLAs in Calgary. He's got 20 MLAs in Edmonton. Surely one of them should be willing to step aside to make room for him. We're just so delighted to have someone with John's experience. We of course know that law and order and public safety is an increasing concern for people. To have somebody who has that on-the-ground experience of having run a police force is going to give a lot of insight into our decision making at the caucus table.
In response, NDP leader Naheed Nenshi had this to say, quote, "When the opportunity presents itself, I will jump in, but I am not going to bribe an MLA to step aside from what is their life's dream to serve as a member of the legislature, just so that I can get a seat and be in question, period. If Danielle wants to create a vacancy for me in Calgary, I'd be thrilled," end quote. It's not a statistic we like to think about, but research and reporting shows as many as 1 in 3 children are being affected by some form of sexual luring. October is Child Abuse Awareness Month, which means it's important to learn how to spot the signs of abuse, grooming, or child luring. I recently sat down with Christine Cassie of the Chinook Sexual Assault Center, who explains what to watch for and what to do if you see the signs of abuse. Take a look.
What we know from the stats, both from a prevalence study that was done through the Alberta Association of Sexual Assault Services and stats that we get through policing agencies and child welfare agencies across Canada, is that it impacts about 1 in 3 kids. And so we look at a 34% prevalence rate really for child sexual abuse alone. In the city of Lethbridge, that would mean about 6,800 kids that may be impacted by some form of sexual abuse or some sort of sexual violation. So these are really staggering numbers that we're dealing with. We also know that this is one of the leading issues that leads to, when the trauma hasn't been resolved, that leads to sexual assault later in life. So there's a direct connection of what's going on here. We also know those that have had that exposure to domestic violence, they're seeing that violence in their home, that they're living this out day after day, that this also leads to other behaviors and things that absolutely impact then how they respond to others as they grow into adult life and how they receive others. So what those healthy relationships may look like. And so our ability to be able to identify, to address, to intervene, we need to do, because if we don't deal with that trauma early, we know that we're setting up for a lifelong struggle.
Yeah. October, of course, is National Child Abuse Prevention Month. So what is the Chinook Sexual Assault Center doing locally this month?
Well, beyond, putting out information, which we like to put out there, and doing some, presentations in schools and with other professionals, we have a 50-50 going on, so people can actually win some cash, but the money that's garnered from that actually helps to support our therapeutic resources at the Chinook Child and Youth Advocacy Center. Beyond that, we're available for people if they want information about child abuse and how maybe they need to report and are scared to report on something, that we can help walk them through what some of those reporting mechanisms would be for them.
Right. That's a way to kind of turn a really dark topic into kind of some light there to sort of earn, raise some money for it. So like getting back to the issue, what are some of the signs that a child may be experiencing abuse? What should we be looking for?
If you're an outsider looking in, sometimes what you may see is, certainly if it's physical abuse, you might see some bruising that really can't be explained on what that is. You might see some withdrawal behaviors are happening where they're not part of their regular or normal activities. You may see disassociation when they're in a school setting where they aren't able to focus. That could be for anything from physical abuse to domestic violence or sexual violence that's happening in the home. But you're going to see these changes in behaviors that are happening that way. For kids that are neglected, you may see that they don't have the proper clothing, they don't have the proper food to eat, things like this. You might see them losing a lot of weight, whatever that might be, and just in a state of neglect in that way. For others, you're seeing them as lost and not really doing so well because they aren't necessarily having those emotional connections where they need them. For any of us looking in, it's important to ask some questions about what's going on. Do you need anything? What might I be able to help with? Asking about how that what's going on. And certainly we see teachers are great for this in being able to recognize things. Schools are a big factor in a child's life, and they help to identify when these types of things are going on. Family members too sometimes get really concerned and will make those calls, those very difficult calls to make. But we know when you make that call, if we can get in, an assessment can be done, we can intervene early. And it doesn't mean that the family is going to be necessarily torn apart. It may mean that they're getting the resources they need to be able to work through some very difficult times, to learn some different behaviors. Some of us grew up in a time where spanking was, pretty much, that was the only parenting style. And although some of us, we may joke about it now, it's really not acceptable anymore to do that. There's other ways that we can parent and discipline our kids, and how we can put healthy boundaries in place to help people, progress. Beyond that is looking at who's having access to our kids and how do we identify when our child might be being groomed. How to identify when our family is being befriended because someone wants to have access to our children in that way. And so knowing some of those signs and what to look for is really important. And again, just knowing that, people are a call away and they really do want to help with that. And that both is through the Sexual Assault Center, the Child and Youth Advocacy Center, and a number of other resources that we have in the city of Lethbridge.
According to Stats Canada, child luring accounted for 77% of online sexual offenses against children. And since predators never miss an opportunity to find victims, parents and caregivers need to be vigilant and know where to report an incident. Corporal Heather Bangle, who works with Alert's Internet Child Exploitation Unit, discussed the warning signs when it comes to your child being targeted.
Some of the red flags and warning signs when kids are communicating with people online. I know they've heard this, but don't talk to strangers. Don't accept friend requests from people you don't know. Even if they have mutual friends in common, so many of the kids that are getting sextorted said that, well, I thought it was okay because 2 of my friends are friends with them. Well, that's just because that's the way they operate, right? These people that are perpetrating the sextortion are very good at what they do. So if they start to withdraw or, their behavior changes, ask those questions. You are aware and your children are aware of the dangers online, and have these actual conversations about what they could encounter. Report it to the platform. So report the account that the incident happened on, whether it be Snapchat or Instagram.
According to cybertip.ca, data shows reports of online sexual luring of Canadian kids is up 815% over the past 5 years. And in a related story, since more and more kids have access to the internet, with many having their own social media accounts, Instagram has now implemented some new rules for users under the age of 18. The problem is it's somewhat easy for kids to circumvent. In this next interview, Sharon Polsky, president of the Privacy and Access Council of Canada, explains what social media platforms like Instagram are doing to try and combat the online luring of children, including sexting, and how it leads to sextortion.
Sextortion, sexting. Let's start with sexting. If you show me yours, I'll show you mine. Kids play doctor. Always have. When you get a camera, now you get a cell phone, a smartphone that has a camera. I'll show you my naughty bits. You'll show me yours. I've been online with a friend, because everybody is a friend, because go back to that Maslow hierarchy, we all want to be part of a group and accepted. So somebody gives us an invitation to link to them online, they're a new friend. We don't know the person. It might be a completely bogus photo and profile. They might have the language that sounds kind of like someone my age, a kid, and is actually a grown-up, someone who's a pedophile, a groomer, a predator.
For sure.
They earn your trust. They should ask for a picture, maybe in a bikini or without a top. And well, it's pretty innocent, and it's, just kids. So you send them something, and then they say, okay, well, I want more and I want more. You already trust them. You've already sent them. You send them a little more. And then they say, good, now I want these specific, very graphic photos, or else I'm going to put them online. I'm going to share them publicly. I'm going to put them on a porn site. I'm going to tell your family. I'm going to post it to you. Kids are mortified to the point, literally, some kids have taken their own lives out of fear of being outed for having done something. And that's sexting. It's extortion. With a sexual connotation.
It's like extorting money also for these favors.
It is.
Or, if you don't pay me, I'm gonna show these images everywhere, and these poor kids are just and there has been some suicides about it. So getting back to what is Instagram doing to protect this, or are they doing anything?
Well, they all, and I'm not talking about one platform or another in specific, but most of them say we have terms of service, we have community rules. If you breach them, our systems will find it, and you will be blocked. There will be severe consequences. But I look to Pornhub. They have tens of millions of users. Their terms of service also say only photos that are and videos that are posted with consent will be allowed. Anything that's underage, that's non-consensual, will be blocked, will be removed. The words sound good, but they've been taken to court by many young women who basically were drugged, raped. Their videos are online without their consent, and it literally took years for the images and the content to be removed, if at all. And in the meantime, it can be downloaded by other people and shared and proliferates around the internet.
Yeah. In doing research, I saw that the Privacy Commissioner of Canada did a sweep of more than 1,000 websites and mobile apps and found that 97% of websites and the apps that were reviewed were using one or more deceptive design patterns that make it difficult for people to protect their privacy online. And that includes children's apps. And that's really appalling, Sharon.
It is, but it's not new. This has been going on from day one, and it has been allowed to proliferate. And this sounds really cynical, perhaps, but it's a fact of corporate life. And this is not to slam capitalism, because it's not capitalism that's the problem. It's a choice. It's a business decision that's been made by people in the organizations. They choose to do this because it helps to make the profits. And from the government side, they're complicit, because for every new innovation, for every new app, technology, there's something put out on the internet, there's marketing, there's employment, there's travel, there's computers, there's all sorts of goods that are purchased to create these things. That helps the economy, and it provides taxation. Governments want this to happen. They're loath to put any limits on it.
Sure. Okay, we've identified the problem. So what can viewers do to help bring about change and to protect themselves from companies invading their privacy?
Well, first of all, we have to remember that there's been precious little valid, real education about any of this, certainly in Canada. And I'm talking about into the university level as well. So the parents and the teachers know as little about most of this as the lawmakers and the bureaucrats who are saying, yes, this is a great idea. They have to educate themselves. People spend countless hours on the internet, doom scrolling, looking at cats and dogs, and the information is out there to educate yourself as to what is a legitimate source for information and learn the laws. Someone told me long ago, leave everything between the commas out. It's English, it's basic English, but it's complex sentence structure. So leave out what's between the commas and it makes a whole lot more sense. It's easier to read. There's summaries of laws too. Understand what your rights and your responsibilities are. Talk to you, and an important part is talk to not only the people who are now in elected office, talk to the constituency associations between elections and say, I want to know what the candidate that you support, and talk to the candidate. I want to know what your views are, not your parties. I want to know what your views are about this issue, and what will you do about this and that. That will reveal whether they know what they're talking about, because you've already educated yourself and you know more about it than they do by that point, and make it an election issue. If you don't do this, I'm not going to vote for you. If you do that, I will vote for you. They want the votes.
After the break, we visit a special place that makes a difference in the lives of abandoned and mistreated dogs and helps them find their forever home. The town of Coaldale, Alberta is looking into a pilot project with the province that would allow golf carts to run on certain municipal roads in the town. An announcement took place Thursday morning at the Land O'Lakes Golf and Country Club, showcased by local MLA Grant Hunter and Coaldale Mayor Jack Van Ryn. Hunter says the bylaw is a common sense approach in dealing with the use of carts in the community. The Land O'Lakes Golf Club surrounds residential streets in the town, which previously was allowed to run golf carts until 2022 due to non-compliance with Alberta traffic safety laws.
On June 14th, 2024, Alberta's government began working with municipalities to establish pilot projects to allow golf carts on municipal roads. This change will provide Albertans with additional mobility and recreational options as well. To date, 6 communities comprising of the county of Lacombe, the village of Linden, the summer village of Whispering Hills, the town of Delburn, the village of Acme, and Half Moon Bay have applied for and been approved to use golf carts in their communities. Coaldale was waiting for the announcement to apply before they applied.
The first step is that we have to incorporate new bylaws. Once we figure out what area we're going to be doing this, and then once we get the bylaw in place, then we can do the application to the province. And I feel extremely confident that we can have this all in place for spring.
Alberta would be the 4th province to introduce provisions to allow golf carts on municipal roads. The pilot project is expected to last for 5 years. Well, there's an organization in Taber, Alberta that cares for vulnerable dogs that have been mistreated, abandoned, or neglected. BCN's Landon Hickok stopped by the Lost Paws Society to find out what they do to give man's best friend a second lease on life.
I am outside the Lost Paws Society in Taber, Alberta, and I am about to go inside and meet a couple of our furry friends who are in search of a forever home. And if you're thinking of becoming a future pet owner yourself, here's why you should consider adopting a dog here at the Lost Paws Society. This is Frankie and Clifford. These 2 dogs have been with the care of Lost Paws while they await a new owner to take them to a new home. Frankie is a lab and bully mix and is described as happy-go-lucky with a balance between laid back and active, and is a great dog for children. Clifford, an Anatolian Shepherd mix, is a year and a half old, but still weighs 120 pounds. But he is described as very gentle and a great dog for families. He is crate and leash trained and can socialize well with other dogs.
Some of the things that we see when they come in is that they are under-socialized, maybe not used to even being in a home. A lot of them are really scared to even get inside of a home.
I mean, we get new dogs probably every week. Yeah. We get new dogs. Mm-hmm.
The Lost Paws Society began operations in 2018 and has helped found homes for hundreds of dogs that were either missing, neglected, or abandoned. The organization consists of 9 board members and around 30 volunteers among paid staff. I was able to take a tour with some of the staff at the facility to get a behind-the-scenes idea of how the facility is run and how they care for the dogs here.
So this is our food storage room. All the food is donated by our local pet store and just people in the community. We're looking pretty good right now. We're pretty full with food, and sometimes when we have too much, we'll donate some to other rescues that are in need. These 6 kennels are on the bylaw side, so this would be for dogs at large, dogs from victim services, those kind of dogs that have owners. We're just looking for the owners. We planted all these trees. They're all memorial trees in memory of loved ones, like mostly animals, some people, or whatever people wanted to put in memory of. We planted some grass this spring, so we're working on developing this into a nice green space for the dogs to play.
And with plenty of volunteers and staff at Lost Paws, there is no shortage of socializing opportunities that the dogs get that helps them bond with other dogs and especially other humans.
People definitely mentioned to us that they can see the quality of care that we have, and people who have adopted our dogs also say the same. I mean, we've had people come from out of province as far as Smithers, BC, to adopt dogs that really aren't the easiest dogs in terms of adopting. I mean, that have behavioral issues, and they're now thriving and just, again, that second shot at life, and they're a dog and they're just, yeah, living life to the fullest.
For Bridge City News, I'm Landon Hickok.
Up next, the sad reality for many seniors is that there are often feelings of isolation and loneliness. We hear from a seniors pastor who discusses how they can begin to deal with those feelings.